Shama had always been a devoted wife. For 13 years, she had lived in her husband's house, silently enduring every storm. She had never raised her voice, never talked back, and had accepted her fate with quiet resignation. Her husband, Sarfaraz, wasn't a cruel man, but he had always been distant, cold even. He treated her more like a duty than a partner, and though she longed for affection, she never demanded it. But everything changed the day Shama accidentally overheard a conversation between Sarfaraz and his sister. Her heart sank as she listened from the staircase. He was planning to take a second wife. The reason? Shama had not been able to give him a child. She felt the air knock out of her lungs. For years, she had silently blamed herself for their childlessness, had accepted it as God's will. But to hear him so casually talk about replacing her, it shattered something deep inside her. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with panic, anger, humiliation. She kept staring at the ceiling, questioning every moment of her married life. Was she not enough? Was loyalty and devotion not worthy of love? The next morning, her eyes were swollen from crying, but she said nothing. She served breakfast as usual, even smiled faintly when Sarfaraz looked her way. But her soul was burning. It was only when her neighbor, Parveen, dropped by in the afternoon that Shama broke down. Parveen was older, wiser, and known for having strange spiritual connections. She was the kind of woman who spoke with conviction and carried herself like she had all the answers. After hearing Shama's story, Parveen didn't offer sympathy. Instead, she leaned in and whispered something that would change Shama's life forever. "There's a man," Parveen said, "a Nus. Not just any man, a saint. A spiritual healer. People say he's performed miracles for women like you. He lives in a village near Jhelum. He's helped barren women conceive, healed broken homes, and protected wives from second marriages." Shama looked at her with teary, desperate eyes. "Will he help me?" Parveen nodded with a mysterious smile. "But his help comes with discipline. You must follow his guidance exactly. No questions, no doubts. If you do, your husband will never think of another woman again." In her broken state, Shama didn't hesitate. She grabbed her shawl, locked the front door, and followed Parveen out of the house. They took a long, dusty road leading to the outskirts of Jhelum, where mud houses stood like silent watchers of forgotten tales. By the time they reached the spiritual healer's house, the sun was setting behind the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. The house was old, but oddly peaceful. Incense hung heavy in the air, and strange charms dangled from the doorway. Shama's heart thudded in her chest. She didn't know if this was hope or something else. As Shama stepped inside the small, dimly lit room, a strange chill ran down her spine. The walls were covered in faded green cloth embroidered with verses she could not read. An old lantern flickered near a dusty corner, its glow dancing on the cracked floor. In the middle of the room sat a man with closed eyes and a long white beard. He wore a brown shawl wrapped tightly around his shoulders and a black turban. His lips moved in silent recitation. Parveen gestured for Shama to sit down quietly on the floor. The man opened his eyes slowly. They were sharp, black, and unsettling, as if they could read her soul in an instant. Without asking her name or reason for coming, he smiled faintly. "You've come with a broken heart," he said, his voice deep and calm. "But pain is the door through which solutions enter." Shama lowered her eyes. She didn't know how to respond. Something about this man felt powerful, perhaps even dangerous, but she was desperate. She nodded slowly. He closed his eyes again and whispered something under his breath. Then he opened an old wooden box beside him, pulled out a strange black thread, and handed it to her. "Wear this around your neck for 3 nights. No one must see it. Do not take it off, not even while bathing or sleeping." Shama took the thread in trembling hands. "There's more," the man continued. "You must return here on the 4th morning before sunrise. I will give you something that will tie your husband's soul to yours forever, but only if you obey me without question." Shama looked at Parveen, who gave her a reassuring nod. She accepted the thread, thanked the man, and walked out of the house. The evening wind felt colder now. It was dark by the time they reached home. Shama quietly slipped the thread around her neck under her clothes before anyone could notice. That night, as she lay next to Sarfaraz, she felt a strange sensation, almost like warmth seeping into her chest from the thread. Her husband seemed more restless than usual. He turned in bed, muttered something in his sleep, and woke up twice. sweating, confused. The next 2 nights were similar. Shama said nothing but watched Sarfaraz closely. He had started looking at her differently. There was a softness in his eyes she hadn't seen in years. On the third night, he even reached for her hand and held it gently before falling asleep. Her heart fluttered. Was the thread really working? But a shadow of doubt still lingered. What was the spiritual path she had stepped into? Was she doing something forbidden, or was this simply divine justice in her favor? Still, she reminded herself of what the healer had said. No questions, no doubts, obey, and her fate would change. As dawn approached on the fourth morning, Shama rose quietly from bed, slipped on her shawl, and made her way back toward the saint's house. Alone this time, determined and afraid. Shama reached the doorstep just as the first light of dawn broke across the sky. A thick fog blanketed the alley, making everything feel otherworldly. Her heart pounded as she knocked gently on the wooden door. It creaked open without anyone answering. She stepped inside, her breath catching in her throat. The old man was already waiting, seated in the same place, surrounded by incense smoke and candlelight. This time the room felt heavier. A strange, pungent smell hung in the air, making her head spin slightly. He motioned for her to sit. "You have returned and you followed my instruction," he said without emotion. "Now we proceed." He took a small bowl filled with thick black liquid and placed it before her. Then he pulled out a folded parchment, its edges burnt. Unfolding it, he began reading words she couldn't understand, strange syllables spoken with intensity. With each chant, the smoke in the room seemed to swirl in unnatural patterns. Suddenly, he picked up a sharp knife and reached for a white dove kept in a basket near him. Without hesitation, he slit its throat and let the blood drip into the bowl. Shama flinched, her stomach turning, but she didn't dare speak. She remembered his warning, no questions. He stirred the bowl and dipped a tiny cloth into the mixture, then handed it to her. "This is your fate now. Take this cloth, place it under your husband's pillow tonight, and burn it before sunrise tomorrow. Once it's done, his soul will never wander from yours again." Shama took the damp cloth with shaky fingers. "But listen carefully," the man added, his voice lowering. "Do not speak to anyone about this, not even Parveen. And one more thing." He leaned closer. "If you doubt me, if you disobey, your loss will be greater than you can imagine." Shama nodded silently, her heart thudding. She left quickly, clutching the cloth tightly inside her shawl. Her mind swirled with fear and confusion, but also hope. If this really worked, everything could change. When she returned home, Sarfaraz was awake, sipping tea with a tired look in his eyes. He didn't ask where she had been. Instead, he simply said, "You look tired, Shama. Get some rest." For the first time in years, his words didn't feel bitter. That night, when he finally fell asleep, Shama slipped the cloth under his pillow. Her hands trembled as she did so, but she remembered the saint's words and forced herself to continue. She barely slept that night, her eyes fixed on the pillow, her ears straining for any sound. Just before sunrise, she quietly took the cloth and went to the backyard. As instructed, she burned it completely. A gust of wind rose suddenly, stronger than it should have been. The ashes scattered into the air, vanishing like mist. She turned around and saw Sarfaraz standing in the doorway, staring at her. For a moment, everything froze. Sarfaraz stood silently in the doorway, barefoot, his expression unreadable. The rising sun cast an orange glow on his face. Shama's heart nearly stopped. She couldn't tell if he had seen the burning cloth or just stepped out for air. She quickly wiped her hands on her shawl, trying to calm her breathing. "You're up early," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Sarfaraz didn't reply. He looked at her for a long time, his eyes unusually soft. Then he turned back inside without a word. That alone was enough to shake Shama. He hadn't argued, hadn't shouted, just silence. All day, Sarfaraz acted differently. He didn't snap at her. He didn't ignore her. He even offered to carry his own lunchbox when leaving for work. Shama watched him from the window, uncertain whether to feel relieved or afraid. Was the charm working, or was something else going on? That evening, Parveen knocked on the door. Shama hesitated before answering, remembering the old man's warning. She tried to keep her tone light. "Salam, Parveen. I was just cleaning up." Parveen raised an eyebrow. "You look pale. Is everything okay?" "I'm fine, just didn't sleep well," Shama replied quickly. Parveen pushed her way inside as usual, not needing an invitation. She glanced around and then lowered her voice. You went to see him, didn't you? Shama stiffened. Who? Don't pretend. The Payar near the shrine, Parveen whispered. I warned you not to get involved with him. People say his powers are dark. My cousin tried something from him once. Her husband lost his mind 6 months later. Shama swallowed hard but kept her expression calm. I don't know what you're talking about. Parveen sighed and reached for her hand. I'm your friend, Shama. I know how much you've suffered. But be careful. Don't try to fix one wrong with something worse. After Parveen left, Shama sat by herself for a long time, staring at the burned spot in the backyard where the cloth had turned to ash. Her thoughts tangled in fear and hope. Could what she'd done actually backfire? That night, Sarfaraz returned from work with a surprise. Flowers. Actual flowers, like he used to bring her before their marriage turned sour. Shama's eyes welled up as he handed them to her without saying a word. It felt unreal. For the first time in years, she smiled with genuine feeling. As they ate dinner, he asked, Did you do something different today? I feel peaceful. Shama's hand froze midway to her mouth. She looked up, searching his face for sarcasm, but found none. Just sincerity. I'm trying to change, she lied gently. Sarfaraz nodded. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. That night, he touched her hand before they went to sleep. A small gesture, but it made Shama's heart swell. Maybe the nightmare was finally ending, but far away in the corner of the old shrine, the Pir sat cross-legged, his eyes closed, his lips moving slowly, and the black smoke from the incense twisted upward like a warning yet to come. For the next few days, everything began to feel like a dream Shama never wanted to wake up from. Sarfaraz had become gentler, calmer. He would speak softly to her, help around the house, and even laugh, a sound she hadn't heard from him in years. Neighbors began to notice. You both look so happy these days, one auntie commented, her eyes curious. Shama smiled, but her heart fluttered with nerves. She had told no one the truth. At night, Sarfaraz would hold her hand and speak of things that once seemed impossible. Moving to a better home, starting a family, planning a future together. His words warmed her, but somewhere deep inside, a faint voice whispered, This isn't real. This isn't him. The changes were too sudden, too perfect. Then one night, as they lay together in bed, Sarfaraz suddenly turned to her and said something that made her blood run cold. Do you remember the shrine near the canal? He asked. Shama's body stiffened. Which shrine? The one they say grants wishes. Where people go when they're desperate, he said slowly. I walked past it 2 days ago on my way to work. I don't know why, but I felt strange. As if something inside was calling me. Shama forced a laugh. It's just superstition. Probably your mind playing tricks. But Sarfaraz didn't laugh. No, it wasn't just that. Ever since then, I've had dreams. I see someone, a man with no face, standing in smoke. He keeps whispering things I can't remember when I wake up. But I wake up soaked in sweat. Shama's heart pounded in her chest. She reached over and gently stroked his hair. It's probably just stress, she whispered. Sarfaraz turned away and soon fell asleep, but Shama didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the peaceful rhythm broke. Shama found one of Sarfaraz's shirts torn into shreds and stuffed behind the cupboard. It was charred at the edges, as if scorched by fire. She knew she hadn't done it, and Sarfaraz certainly wouldn't. A chill ran down her spine. When he came home that evening, his eyes were red, his face pale. I couldn't concentrate all day, he muttered. And I got into a fight with the foreman. He accused me of disrespect. Shama nodded slowly, her worst fear beginning to unfold. That night, the dreams returned. This time for her. She saw herself standing in the courtyard of her house, surrounded by shadows whispering her name. In the center stood the Pir, eyes glowing in the dark. He didn't speak. He only raised a finger and pointed at her. Shama woke up screaming. Sarfaraz rushed to her side, alarmed. She clutched him tightly, her body trembling. "It was just a dream," he said, trying to calm her. But Shama knew it wasn't just a dream, it was a warning. Something had been disturbed, and it was beginning to awaken. The days that followed felt like walking through a thick fog, silent, heavy, and unnerving. Sarfaraz's strange behavior continued to intensify. He would stare at the wall for minutes, his eyes blank, as though trapped in another world. He spoke less, ate mechanically, and sometimes laughed to himself for no reason. What frightened Shama most was the way he had started talking in his sleep. One night she sat upright as Sarfaraz mumbled unintelligible words beside her. She leaned closer, trying to understand, and caught just one clear phrase. "Give me what I was promised." Her blood ran cold. The next morning, she confronted him gently over breakfast. "Do you remember having any dreams last night?" Sarfaraz looked up slowly, chewing absent-mindedly. "No," he replied. "Why?" Shama shook her head. "Nothing. You were just restless." But her heart screamed the truth. She had done something unnatural. The PR hadn't warned her about consequences. He had only offered results. Now, something beyond her control was bleeding into their lives, and Sarfaraz was no longer fully himself. She tried to seek answers. Quietly, without alerting anyone, Shama visited the shrine again. It was late afternoon. The dusty air smelled of rose petals and smoke. She asked around for the PIR, but the old man who sold incense there told her something that shattered her world. "The pier?" he said, blinking in confusion. "There hasn't been a pier here in years. The last one died nearly a decade ago. People come here with wishes, but no one performs any rituals anymore." Shama felt the ground beneath her feet shift. "But I saw him. I spoke to him," she insisted. The man looked at her with sympathy. "You must have seen a beggar or a trickster. These days, people will say anything for money. But don't go playing with such things, sister. Some doors, once opened, never close again." Shama left the shrine trembling, gripping her dupatta tightly. When she returned home, Sarfaraz wasn't there. She waited, pacing nervously, checking the time every few minutes. At 11 p.m., he finally walked in, his face pale, his kurta smeared with dirt. "Where were you?" she asked, trying to sound calm. "I don't know," he muttered. "I was walking, I think, but I don't remember where." He went straight to bed, leaving Shama frozen in place. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the moonlit street outside, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. She had broken something sacred, and now, piece by piece, it was coming undone. The man she loved, the one she had tried so desperately to keep, was slipping away. Not to another woman, but to something far more terrifying. The next morning, Sarfaraz didn't come out of his room. Shama knocked gently, then pushed the door open to find him sitting cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, murmuring under his breath. A chill ran down her spine. He wasn't praying. The words spilling from his mouth were not Arabic, nor Urdu. They were unfamiliar, broken, and almost inhuman. "Sarfaraz?" she whispered. His eyes shot open. For a moment, they didn't look like his. They were bloodshot, wide, and filled with something dark. Then, as quickly as the look appeared, it vanished. He blinked and looked at her, confused. "Shama, why are you standing there like that?" Her mouth felt dry. You were talking in your sleep again." He frowned and stood up slowly, brushing imaginary dust off his kurta. "I don't remember. Maybe I was dreaming." But Shama knew this was not just a dream. Something had attached itself to Sarfaraz, something she had invited into their lives. That night, while he was asleep, she searched his phone. She hoped to find something, anything, that would explain what was happening. but there were no calls, no suspicious messages, nothing unusual. She checked the gallery. Her fingers froze when she came across a video she hadn't seen before. It was a recording, a dark room, a candle flickering in the center, and Sarfaraz, sitting exactly as he had that morning, murmuring those same words. But the disturbing part wasn't just Sarfaraz. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, was a shadow, a tall, looming figure, unmoving, yet unmistakably present. She slammed the phone shut, gasping for air. Her mind screamed at her to leave, to run far away from this cursed house, but her heart, the same heart that once longed to keep Sarfaraz forever, now refused to abandon him. She needed help. Shama decided to speak to an elder in the family, her grandmother's brother, known for his wisdom and knowledge of old spiritual practices. The next day, she visited his home and, in a shaking voice, told him everything. He listened quietly. When she finished, he let out a long sigh. "You went to a payar who doesn't exist," he said gravely. "You performed a ritual with no guidance, no protection. Do you understand what you've done?" Shama's eyes welled up. "Can I fix it?" He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but only if he hasn't already made a deal." She swallowed hard. "A deal?" "Yes," he said, voice firm. "If Sarfaraz offered something in return, his soul, his mind, even his sanity, then it won't let go easily. You need to act fast, Shama, before you lose him completely." Shama returned home trembling, her heart pounding. She looked at Sarfaraz sitting silently in the corner, eyes distant. She didn't know how much time she had left. But one thing was clear, the clock was ticking. That night, Shama stayed awake, watching Sarfaraz as he slept restlessly beside her. His breaths were uneven, his hands twitching now and then, and sweat glistened on his forehead. She wanted to shake him awake and beg him to talk to her, to return to who he once was. But something in her heart warned her not to disturb him. Not yet. She clutched the taweez her great-uncle had given her, a protective charm inscribed with powerful verses, and kept it under her pillow. He had told her it might keep the evil at bay, but it wouldn't reverse what had already begun. Suddenly, Sarfaraz sat up straight, eyes wide open. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring into the dark corner of the room, the exact same spot that had haunted her since she watched that video. Then in a deep, almost guttural voice, he whispered, "They're watching." Shama's heart stopped. "Who is watching, Sarfaraz?" But he didn't respond. He lay back down like nothing had happened and drifted off. The next morning, she found ashes on the windowsill. Not dust, ashes, as if something had burned right there inside the room. The curtains near the window had faint scorch marks, though nothing had caught fire. Terrified, Shama returned to her great-uncle's home. "You said he might have made a deal," she said breathlessly. "How can I know for sure?" The old man looked at her gravely. "Ask him. Not his waking self, his dreaming self. Burn incense around him. Watch what he says. The spirit speaks through the dreamer." That night, with trembling hands, Shama lit incense and sat near Sarfaraz's bed as he slept. She waited, and then, just before dawn, he began to speak again. "They promised me strength," he muttered. "Control, power over her mind." Shama froze. "I said yes." Her breath caught in her throat. It was true, he had accepted. The PR hadn't just awakened something. Sarfaraz had made a bargain, to become the dominant one in their bond, to never be abandoned again. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She had wanted his love. Now she had his possession, and the darkness that came with it. Shama couldn't breathe. The man sleeping beside her was no longer the Sarfaraz she had married. He was someone or something else now. A man who had willingly traded his soul for power. Not for wealth, not for success, but to control her, to bend her to his will. The next morning, she prepared breakfast with shaking hands. Sarfaraz entered the kitchen, calm and composed, as if the horrors of the night had never occurred. He kissed her on the forehead and asked, "Did you sleep well?" She forced a smile. "Yes." But inside, her mind was screaming. She needed to act, quietly, carefully. One wrong move and he would know she was onto him, and she couldn't risk that, not until she understood how far this deal had gone. That evening, when Sarfaraz stepped out to meet a client, Shama rummaged through the locked drawer in his cupboard. She had memorized the sound of his keychain, the order of the keys. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were things she couldn't believe. A black candle partially melted, a red handkerchief stained with what looked like dried blood, a piece of parchment with symbols drawn in a language she couldn't read, and then a small clay doll, shaped like a woman, pierced with metal pins. Her heart nearly stopped. It was her. The doll was wearing a tiny green dupatta, exactly like the one she had worn the day she confronted him about his second marriage. She placed everything back exactly as it was and closed the drawer before he returned. Her heart thudded against her ribs all evening, but she stayed silent. That night, she called her great uncle again. I found a doll, a black candle. Symbols. He's doing something. He's keeping me trapped. The old man didn't sound surprised. He's gone too far, he said quietly. You can't break this alone anymore. You'll need to do what your ancestors did when dark sorcery entered their home. What? She asked. You'll have to confront the pair, the real source. Face him in his own place of darkness. And you must go alone. Shama's blood ran cold. She looked over at Sarfaraz, asleep and smiling in a dream that was no longer innocent. She knew what she had to do. She had to return to Chelem, to the place where it all began. Shama stepped off the bus in Chelem just as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting the city in a golden haze. Her heart pounded as she looked around. The dusty streets, the old mosque near the shrine, and finally the narrow path that led to the Pir's Havali. It was quieter than she remembered, more sinister. The last time she had come here, she was naive, desperate to save her marriage. Now, she was here to save herself. She wore a plain black shawl and carried nothing but a prayer book and a small pouch of salt, as instructed by her great uncle. You'll know when to use it, he had told her. The gate creaked open with a whisper of wind. The courtyard was empty. Not a single murmur, no disciples, no candles, just silence. Shama's footsteps echoed as she approached the same door she had once knocked on with trembling hope. It was already open. Inside, the room smelled of burnt incense and rotting flowers. And there he was, the Pir, seated cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, chanting in a voice that chilled her blood. He opened his eyes slowly, as if he had been expecting her. So, you've returned, he smiled, his voice slithering through the air. But this time, you're not asking for love. You're here to take it back. Shama didn't speak. She pulled the pouch of salt from her shawl, opened it, and began circling him silently, sprinkling the salt in a complete ring. His smile faltered. You think this will protect you? He growled, standing up. You belong to the bond now. Sarfaraz's soul is tied to mine, and so is yours. Shama's voice was steady. Then untie it. With trembling fingers, she opened her prayer book and began reciting Ayatul Kursi with conviction. The walls shook. The candles blew out. The Pir screamed, his face contorting as if unseen hands were tearing him apart. A final roar, and then silence. When she opened her eyes, the room was empty. No Pir, no smoke, just stillness. Back home, Sarfaraz was different. Lost, confused, like waking from a long fever. He didn't remember the doll, the drawer, or the threats. And Shama, she had found herself again. But she would never forget the price. And she would never trust a Pir again.